I moved to Hawthorne Drive in early spring, a peaceful suburb nestled just outside the city. After 10 years on the highway patrol, I was ready for a slower pace, gardening, grilling, maybe even a golden retriever. The house was a fixer-upper, but I liked the bones. Big backyard. No nosy neighbors. Or so I thought. It didn't take long for the letters to start. The first one was about my mailbox. Yes, my mailbox. The font was Times New Roman, classic HOA passive-aggressive. The letter read, per Section 7B of the Hawthorne Homeowners Code, all mailboxes must be regulation-approved bronze, with black numerical decals. Yours appears to be silver. Silver. That was their issue. Not that it was crooked. Not that it was falling over. Just not bronze. I laughed, tossed the letter, and replaced the mailbox with a bigger, shinier chrome one. Just because. The next morning, a bright orange sticker was slapped across my garage. Non-compliant structure. HOA fine pending. That was the first time I met Randall Prescott. He was wearing a reflective vest, clipboard in hand, and a smug look you only see in DMV supervisors and local tyrants. His golf cart said, HOA Enforcement Unit, on the side in Comic Sans font. I kid you not. Comic Sans.
Morning, he said.
I see you've ignored our warning. I see you think you're a cop, I said, still in my patrol uniform, sipping coffee from a mug that read, Don't tread on me unless you want to get treaded. He glanced at the badge on my chest, then narrowed his eyes. You're not above the rules here, sir. This neighborhood maintains a standard. Got it. Just curious, does your standard include felony impersonation of a law enforcement vehicle? He didn't like that. Didn't say anything either. Just scribbled something on his clipboard and drove away like a dictator on training wheels. Over the next week, the harassment escalated. They fined me $150 for improper trash placement because I didn't bring it in before 6 p.m. Then $200 for unauthorized grass type. Apparently Bermuda wasn't on their list of approved turfs. But the final straw came when they showed up at night. I had just come off a double shift. Exhausted, I parked my patrol car on the driveway and went inside. The next morning, there was a violation notice pinned under my wiper. Commercial vehicle parked on private property, code 8F. I almost choked on my cereal. That was my patrol car. Clearly marked, state issued. And these clowns thought they could ticket me? I confronted Randall the next day, badge and citation in hand. This is an official vehicle. And this is a private community, he replied unfazed. All commercial vehicles are to be kept out of sight. You know what I do for a living, right? He smirked. And I know what I do for this community. Perhaps it's time someone reminded you who's in charge here. I stared at him for a long beat. There's a kind of man who, when handed a sliver of power, builds a throne out of it. Randall was that man. But I wasn't just any homeowner. I had a badge. I had time. And I had a plan. By mid-May, the HOA had transformed from a bureaucratic nuisance into something darker. Something organized. Militarized, even. Randall Prescott, emboldened by whatever fantasy he was living out, formally announced the formation of a Community Standards Patrol. He called it the CSP, as if branding gave it legitimacy. On paper, it was harmless, a volunteer group to help enforce HOA regulations. In practice, it was a crew of suburban zealots in knockoff tactical vests, roaming the neighborhood in golf carts outfitted with cheap sirens and decals that read CSP Enforcement Division. Their leader? Randall, of course. He'd upgraded his clipboard to a tablet and wore wraparound sunglasses even when it rained. His second-in-command was Carol Denton, a retired insurance agent who treated violations like mortal sins. Together, they patrolled the streets like stormtroopers of suburbia. I watched them from my porch one Saturday morning. Carol was pointing at a child's chalk drawing on the sidewalk. Randall took a photo, shook his head in disapproval, then scribbled something on his tablet. The kid, maybe 7 years old, looked confused, holding a pink chalk stick like it was contraband. I couldn't take it anymore. Later that day, I knocked on the door of house number 14, home of Martin and Lydia Rodriguez. They were quiet, private folks in their 50s who kept their lawn pristine and never bothered anyone. But word around the block was they'd recently been fined nearly $800 for excessive decorative elements, code for having wind chimes and 2 garden gnomes. Martin answered the door, cautious. "I'm not here as a cop," I said. "Just a neighbor. I think it's time we talked." Inside, Lydia served coffee while Martin sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. I laid out everything I knew. Randall's fake citations, the CSP's unlawful patrols, and the obscure fines meant to bully residents into compliance or out of the neighborhood entirely. "They fined us for hummingbird feeders," Lydia said quietly, voice trembling. Said it disrupted the aesthetic harmony. Martin wanted to fight it, but Martin shook his head. "I tried. They doubled the fine. Then started citing us for landscaping. I think they want us gone." "They've done this before?" I asked. He nodded. 3 families moved out this year, all after multiple fines and legal threats. That was it. This wasn't about order. It was about control. Over the next week, I started gathering intel. I spoke with 12 families. 9 had received citations in the past month. 5 said they'd stopped attending HOA meetings out of fear of retaliation. 2 were already looking to sell their homes. What I needed was proof. Real proof. Not anecdotal complaints, but documentation. That's when I met Casey Tran. Casey was 28, worked in cybersecurity, and lived 3 houses down. She was the kind of person who never folded to bullies, especially ones on a power trip. "They tried to fine me for flying a pride flag last year," she told me. Said it violated the political neutrality clause. I sued. HOA backed off, but they started targeting me in other ways. "Do you still have any records?" I asked. Casey grinned and opened a laptop. "Oh, I've got everything." Her digital archive was extensive: emails, scanned citations, even secret audio from HOA meetings she'd attended. Most damning was a PDF titled Community Integrity Guidelines, Internal Use Only, a document never distributed to residents. Inside were clauses that went far beyond anything in the publicly available rulebook: surveillance recommendations, property inspections without notice, even guidelines on subtle pressure tactics for non-compliant homeowners. "This isn't a code of conduct," I said, scrolling through. "It's a psychological warfare manual." Casey nodded. "It's how they push people out without legal liability. Harassment disguised as regulation." It was time for action. At the next HOA meeting, held in the local community center, I showed up early. I wore civilian clothes, kept a low profile, and let the room fill. About 30 homeowners trickled in, most looking tired, wary, or just defeated. Randall arrived last, flanked by Carol and a 3rd enforcer, a new recruit named Kyle, probably in his 20s, wearing a black polo and fingerless gloves. Randall opened the meeting with his usual smug authority. "Let's begin," he said, tapping his tablet. "First order of business, property line enforcement. We've received several complaints regarding unauthorized fencing." I stood up. "I have an order of business." Heads turned. Randall blinked. "This is a closed session," he said. "I'm a homeowner, which makes it open to me. You're also under review for repeated violations." I walked to the front and placed 3 folders on the table. "1," I said, tapping the first, "is a legal complaint against the HOA for harassment. 2, I tapped the second, is a copy of your so-called internal guidelines, which include surveillance and manipulation strategies that aren't disclosed in the public charter." I turned to the crowd. 3 is the most important, a petition for a vote to dissolve the current HOA board, per Article 9 of the Community Charter. All we need is 15 signatures. Randall's face turned from pink to crimson. "This is outrageous. You've overstepped." "No," I said. "You did." I looked around the room. "You fined a veteran couple for wind chimes. You threatened a woman for a flag on her porch. You cited a kid for drawing on the sidewalk. And now you've armed a bunch of bored retirees with radios and delusions of authority. I don't care about the mailbox anymore. I care about what this place has become." Silence followed. Then, slowly, a single clap. From Lydia. Then Martin. Then Casey. One by one, people stood. Some nodded. Some came forward. But when the petition was passed around, people signed. Not everyone, but enough. Randall tried to regain control, raised his voice, declared the meeting adjourned. But no one left. That night, the retaliation began. Someone egged my house. The CSP golf cart circled my property at 2 a.m. My mailbox was smashed again. Only this time, they left a note inside. You don't know who you're messing with. They were right about one thing. They didn't know who they were messing with. Because I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a cop with jurisdiction, a stack of evidence, and now, a community behind me. Randall Prescott didn't take the petition lightly. 3 days after the HOA meeting, a thick envelope arrived at my door. Hand-delivered, not mailed. Inside, a cease and desist letter from the HOA's legal counsel citing defamation, malicious disruption, and a laughable demand for $5,000 in fines due to community destabilization. I read it twice. Then I laughed once. Just once. But it wasn't funny. Because while I could handle legal bluffs, not everyone in the neighborhood had my training or my badge. For them, Randall's games weren't annoying. They were terrifying. The retaliation turned surgical. Casey's internet coincidentally went down for 4 straight days after the meeting, just long enough for her remote job to threaten termination. The Rodriguez family came home to find their backyard gate wide open, their koi pond drained, and their shed broken into. No note. No apology. Just quiet intimidation. Someone was turning the screws. Hard. But it was Carol Denton who gave me the first real break. It was Sunday morning. I spotted her at the farmer's market. Alone, no clipboard, no badge, no fake uniform. Just Carol, in a red windbreaker and oversized sunglasses, inspecting peaches like the world outside wasn't on fire. I approached cautiously. You ever get tired of playing watchdog? I asked. She didn't flinch. Didn't even look at me. I enforce the rules. No, I said. Randall makes the rules. You just carry them out. Now she looked up. Something flickered behind her eyes, doubt, maybe. Or regret. He said you were dangerous, she said quietly. That you'd bring chaos. What I bring is accountability. She hesitated. He's been doing things without a vote lately. Altering rules. Assigning fines without board approval. I told him to slow down. He told me to shut up. Then help me. Her eyes narrowed. Why would I? Because at some point, I said, this stops being about lawn heights and mailbox paint. And starts being about real consequences. You're smart enough to feel it. I just hope you're brave enough to act on it.
She didn't respond.
But she didn't walk away either. That was enough for now. That night, I opened an official investigation. As a highway patrol officer, my jurisdiction didn't technically include HOA politics, but Randall's Community Standards Patrol had crossed a line. Their patrol vehicle, a tricked-out golf cart with flashing lights and the word enforcement, was being driven on public roads. That made it my business. I filed a report with the Department of Motor Vehicles and another with the Sheriff's Office regarding impersonation of law enforcement. And I contacted the State Licensing Board for Private Security to report CSP as an unlicensed entity operating in a quasi-police capacity. Then I went further. I called in a favor. Detective Samir Chin, a former Academy buddy, worked fraud and abuse in the city's Special Investigations Unit. After I laid out the HOA's activities, he agreed to dig into their financials. I'll poke around their tax filings, he said. HOAs don't get to operate like secret governments. If they've got undisclosed funds, we'll find them. I didn't realize how soon that favor would pay off. 3 days later, Chin called back. You were right to be suspicious, he said. Your HOA collected over $120,000 last year in dues and fines, but only reported $74,000 to the IRS. There's a $46,000 discrepancy. Skimming. Or slush fund. Either way, it's fraud.
He paused.
But that's not the weird part. Go on. The HOA's bank account has regular withdrawals to a vendor called Hawthorne Development Group. It doesn't exist anywhere else in state records. No address. No website. No tax ID. Shell company. Set up 6 months ago. Registered by a guy named Randall Prescott. The next day, Carol Denton showed up at my door. Her eyes were bloodshot. She held a manila envelope in both hands like it weighed 50 pounds. "I can't do this anymore," she said. Inside were board meeting transcripts, internal memos, and screenshots of Randall's emails. It was all there. The unauthorized fines, the secret bank account, the threats, the orders to sabotage homes, the targeting of specific residents. "I didn't know it had gone this far," she whispered. "I thought we were helping the neighborhood." "You were helping Randall," I said gently. "But you're helping the truth now." I compiled everything: Chen's financial findings, Carol's documents, Casey's digital archive, and built the case. It wasn't just about getting Randall removed. It was about ending his reign completely. The timing couldn't have been better, because Randall was about to overplay his hand. That weekend, he held a mandatory compliance review in the park at the center of the neighborhood. An event with folding chairs, a microphone, even a podium. The entire CSP showed up in full faux uniform, looking like weekend warriors prepping for war. I was there too, off-duty, but not unarmed. Randall took the stage, grandiose as ever. "In times of disorder," he said, "we must restore authority. And I promise you, this HOA will never back down to agitators or radicals." He looked directly at me. "That's why, effective immediately, we're enacting Emergency Bylaw 12E, which allows the board to suspend voting privileges and forcibly remove non-compliant homeowners from the community." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People shifted, unsettled. That's when I stepped forward. I raised a folder. "This," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is an official fraud complaint filed with the state attorney's office. It includes evidence of embezzlement, abuse of authority, and impersonation of law enforcement." Randall scoffed. "You can't scare me with paperwork." "You're right," I said. "That's why I brought backup." 2 unmarked sedans pulled up behind the park. Detective Chin stepped out, badge in hand. "Randall Prescott," he called, "you're under investigation for financial misconduct and impersonation of a government official. We'd like you to come with us." Randall turned pale. No, you can't. This is my community." "No," I said, stepping beside him. "This was our community, until you tried to turn it into your kingdom." They cuffed him without resistance. The CSP disbanded in a matter of hours. The podium was gone by sunset. That night, the neighborhood was quiet. No patrol carts. No clipboard stalkers. Just porch lights, barbecue smoke, and wind chimes dancing in the breeze. Carol formally resigned the next morning. The Rodriguez family sent me a pie. Casey texted, "Next time you run for HOA president, I'm printing flyers." I wasn't interested in titles.
Just peace.
But I knew something now. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. And when that power falls into the wrong hands, even in the smallest corners of the world, it takes more than a badge to fight it. It takes courage. It takes community. The morning after Randall Prescott's arrest, a silence hung over the neighborhood, dense, almost reverent. For the first time in months, no citations were slipped under doors. No CSP golf carts stalked the cul-de-sacs. No paranoia buzzed through porch cameras. For once, Crestfield Ridge felt like a community again. But peace doesn't erase scars. The damage was real, financial, emotional, and deeply personal. And now it was time to pick up the pieces. At a special emergency session held 2 weeks later, this time in a neutral location, not the community center Randall had turned into his war room, dozens of residents filled the hall. Some wore cautious expressions, others hope, but all came seeking the same thing: closure. The interim board had appointed a retired judge, Eleanor Brooks, to facilitate the vote to dissolve the current HOA structure and elect new leadership. Casey Tran, standing behind the folding table with a laptop and stacks of ballot forms, smiled at me across the room. "They're actually here," she whispered. "After everything, they still showed up." "Because you gave them a reason to," I said. "We all did." The vote passed, unanimously. The HOA would remain, but its bylaws were to be rewritten from scratch. No more shadow policies. No more selective enforcement. And definitely no more pretend police forces. Crestfield Ridge was ready to start over. Meanwhile, Randall's fall from grace played out exactly how you'd expect for a man who built a fortress on control. Investigators discovered he'd embezzled nearly $70,000 through Hawthorne Development Group, funneling HOA funds into luxury retreats, first-class flights, and suspicious consulting fees. Even worse, several homeowners had their credit damaged by fraudulent liens he'd attempted to file through manipulated documents. His trial was swift. The court found him guilty of wire fraud, impersonation of law enforcement, and malicious abuse of regulatory power under state housing codes. Sentence: 5 years, suspended parole only after restitution was paid in full. When the verdict was read, Randall didn't shout, didn't flail. He just looked small, shrunk down inside the ill-fitting suit his lawyer had probably picked for sympathy. For the first time, the man who'd tried to rule a neighborhood like a tyrant was utterly, completely irrelevant. A few months passed. Grass grew tall again, by choice, not neglect. Children scribbled chalk dragons across sidewalks without fear of reprimand. And the mailbox I'd spent half a year fighting over? Still off color. I never changed it. That was the point. One evening, I sat on my porch as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. A small community cookout was wrapping up nearby. Burgers, laughter, old songs strummed on an out-of-tune guitar. I could smell charcoal and hear someone's dog barking joyfully in the distance. Casey walked up with 2 bottles of beer. To insubordination, she said, clinking hers against mine. To peaceful rebellion, I replied. She sat beside me, exhaling slowly. You ever think it would go this far? I didn't think it would go anywhere, I admitted. It started with a mailbox. Started with control, she corrected. You just happened to be the one person he couldn't intimidate. I looked at her. We were the people he couldn't intimidate. Casey smiled.
Still.
Glad it was you who stood up first. That night, I opened my old case notes and reread every detail. The photos, the transcripts, the letters, the signatures. I didn't do it out of nostalgia. I did it to remember the cost. The cost of letting power run unchecked. The cost of silence. I thought of the Rodriguezes and their drained koi pond. Of Lydia's trembling voice. Of Carol's haunted expression the day she handed me those files. Even Randall, whatever he had once been, was proof of what happens when no one says enough. And I thought about the badge I wore. Not because I used it, because I hadn't. I'd won as a neighbor, not a cop. As a citizen who said, this isn't right, and was stubborn enough to do something about it. That mattered more than a uniform ever could. Weeks later, a new HOA board was elected. Casey joined as tech advisor. Martin Rodriguez became treasurer. And the president? Carol. Yes, that Carol. Her redemption was quiet but sincere. She'd spent the summer canvassing homes, apologizing face-to-face, even paying out of pocket to reimburse fines Randall had levied. People forgave her, slowly. And eventually, they trusted her again. Because she'd made the choice Randall never could, to serve, not control. At her first official meeting, Carol proposed what she called the Porchlight Pact, a simple agreement between residents. We don't spy. We don't shame. We don't weaponize rules. We protect each other's peace, not police it. The vote passed unanimously. I turned on my porch light that night with a full heart. On a brisk October morning, I was out jogging when I noticed a familiar box at the end of someone's driveway. It was a new mailbox. Purple. With a lightning bolt on the side. I slowed down and smiled. A boy, maybe 11, was standing beside it, arms crossed like a soldier guarding a treasure. Cool mailbox, I said, pausing beside him. He looked up. The old one was boring. Dad said I could paint it however I want. I nodded. Your dad sounds smart. He grinned. You should paint yours too. I chuckled. Maybe I will. Then I kept running. Some stories end with fireworks. Mine ended with porch lights. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't watching my neighbors. I was living with them. Because in the battle between control and community, between fear and freedom, there's always a line. Sometimes it's chalk on a sidewalk. Sometimes it's a crooked mailbox. But if you pay attention, you'll know exactly where to stand. And when you do, stand tall.